Hello and welcome to Behind Beloit. I'm your host, Ellie Anderbyrne. This weekly talk show is an opportunity to slow down, ask questions, and introduce the people and systems that make Beloit tick. Today I'm joined by Julie Christensen and Teri Bown with Community Development in the City of Beloit. Welcome, Julie and Teri.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for coming today. So Julie, when people hear community development, what does that mean inside the city, and what does a day-to-day look like for you?
Well, community development is actually a pretty good-sized department, and so it includes planning and building services. So that's your processing of building permits, and it's also processing planning applications like land divisions, variety of development activity. And then community housing services, which is one of the divisions Teri is responsible for, and that would be your code enforcement program, housing services, so housing rehab programs, the grants. There's a number of housing grants and broader community development grants that we receive. Teri's also responsible for transit. So the transit agency came under our department five or so years ago. And then the housing authority, I am the supervisor over the supervisor for the housing authority, which has 130 public housing units and hundreds of Section 8 vouchers. And my day-to-day is really overall supervision, because I have three great division heads, of which Teri is one of them.
Making sure everything works smoothly.
Yeah.
What drew you into this kind of work? Housing, redevelopment, city planning?
So I have a bachelor's degree in sociology. I liked the whole group dynamics and all of that. But what do you do with a liberal arts degree?
Everything.
Anything you want, right?
Anything you want.
And so then I had a wonderful professor who kind of saw my interest in rural and urban sociology and directed me to a program in Milwaukee that was urban planning. And so that's kind of how it started. And then my emphasis option was housing, because I just liked the whole, in Milwaukee, housing is a different situation where they got these huge urban grants where like all the houses all look the same, and it's just kind of an interesting dynamic. And then I
From houses built in which era?
They were built like in the 40s.
Okay.
With a lot of the federal grants that were out there. And then I landed in Beloit specifically. I had worked at a regional planning commission. Didn't really love that, like the idea of trying out the local planning. And at the time I was getting married, and he was down here. And so I kind of happened upon Beloit as a grants person, and some people in the city saw something in me and promoted me up the ranks, and so here I am.
And so here you are. And how about you, Teri? What does your day-to-day look like?
My day-to-day, as Julie said, I oversee the Community Housing Services Division and the Transit Division. And so for Community Housing Services, we have code enforcement, housing rehab loan program, also fair housing, and then the community development grants. So I'm located at City Hall, and that's where all of that division is. And so the day-to-day is just, kind of monitoring what's going on and answering questions. We do a little bit of a strategic planning, with the community development grants and our housing rehab loan program. And then for transit, I have a wonderful operations manager. So he is located at the transfer center most of the time, and then we have a transit supervisor over at the admin building. And that, for me, day to day, I manage all of the grants and kind of the federal regulations and things like that, where my operations manager but he manages the day-to-day logistics of everything, because that is always a moving target all the time. So, and he does a great job doing that, and so does Renee, our supervisor.
Can you talk a little bit about what role the city plays and what role other organizations play in something like the Family Services Project?
So with the Family Services Project, John Fleiter, who was the director at the time, had this idea to do this, and so he was looking for funding. We had not yet taken our ARPA funds, which is the American Rescue Plan Act funds, and allocated them, and he had come to council and I think asked for some assistance, and I think the council passed a resolution at the time committing to assist, but then we did the formal ARPA process, which then allowed him to apply for the funding. At the same time, he was reaching out to Rock County Board. I think they might have done more than one presentation to try to get a portion of their ARPA funds as well. I think that helped kind of kick off the first phase Then they did a capital campaign, and they were able to start on the first phase and then ultimately do a second phase. And then they essentially had a public open house and invited the community out. And what was very cool was that they had all the yearbooks that they had from Royce Elementary. And so Terry, who went there, could find photos of herself when she was a young girl, learning like spelling bees and stuff.
Oh, fun.
But then, you know, the community could come and they were just like rifling through them and finding, you know, just memories and stuff, which was just kind of cool for the community to come out and see that.
Yeah, what a nice thing to repurpose it for another community purpose when it's done being a school.
Yeah.
So maybe you could talk about some projects or areas of the city that residents might not realize are actively being reimagined or invested in various ways. Are there sort of things that are a little more behind the scenes or a little more hidden, but getting improvements nonetheless?
You want to talk about 737 Bluff?
Sure. So one of the programs that I don't think a lot of residents know about that we do is we do a purchase rehab resale.
Okay.
So sometimes we have properties donated to us, or we pick up properties through tax foreclosure or other means that are houses that investors wouldn't. It wouldn't be profitable for them to invest in, but we don't want to tear them down. So we get grant funding, home funding in particular, and in the past we've gotten NSP funding, which was Neighborhood Stabilization Program. Sorry.
Something for the people.
Yeah, Neighborhood Stabilization Program funding that allows the city to be able to kind of take that hit of the you know, of not having
Invest
a profit.
the funds into
it's more of an investment. So 737 Bluff is one of those properties that we'll be rehabbing, and that is on the historic register or just locally landmarked, or both. It's both. It's on the historic register and it's locally landmarked, and so we will do a major rehab of that property, and with those home funds. And then, which will include adding a garage to that space, and that property is right next to Our Savior's Lutheran Church. We actually bought the house from the church. They approached the city and asked us if we were interested in it. It used to be the former Hands of Faith building, and which is now Family Promise.
So after the rehab.
So once the property is rehabbed, then the city sells the property to a low to moderate income family. And there's a, sorry, I'm stumbling again.
So what does that process look like for selling it? Does it go on the open market? Is there population of people in other kinds of housing that are eligible? How would someone who's eligible know that they could buy that house?
Yes, it goes on the market, and then we have been doing some neighborhood outreach to explain to families that are of low to moderate income how they can purchase these properties. Axe Housing has been a great partner in that because they offer homebuyer education and things like that. And same with NeighborWorks, Black Hawk Region, and they also offer down payment assistance. So. And then there's an affordability period, which means it has to stay owner occupied for a certain number of years. So it's not like somebody could buy it and then flip it to...
Or turn it to a rental or something.
Right, turn it to a rental or take that profit. Another thing that's important to know is the city invests that money, and so we might invest more money into rehabbing the property than we can sell it for, but the city generally gets that money back, and our return on investment comes back in about 5 years.
Okay. And if we think about that house, but then you think about all the houses in Beloit, where is their strengths in Beloit's current housing stock, and where are there areas that we're falling short and our priorities to think about?
I think right now where we're falling short is there's not enough affordable units or not enough housing units overall. So we have people who are struggling to pay rent, just with rents going up and all costs going up at this time. And we have a number of subdivisions, which basically a developer comes in, divides up the land, and creates lots that builders can build on. Usually it's one builder for each one. So Next Generation is doing one, New Leaf Homes is doing another one in the Gateway, and so those homes are available for new home buyers who can afford those houses. But we have a shortage of just housing stock being created in general. So we've been working hard to, like with the TIF housing funds, funding some rental opportunities for people who are struggling to rent a home.
So that's making new units for rentals?
Yeah,
Okay.
so new, which is also an exciting project because it's a redevelopment of the old YMCA site.
Okay, yep.
And so there'll be a 55, I think, or 54 unit building going up there starting this spring. It won't be open till next year. But what we find is that wherever you create housing, like if you create more affordable units, then some people move out of houses and they'll move in there. Those houses will be available for other people. And you know, and the same thing, if we create new homes, people move out of existing housing stock into those. But I think the GBDC's, which is Greater Beloit Economic Development Corporation's housing study from almost 5 years ago, showed that we were short hundreds of units. And so it's, with Beloit's property values, it's harder for developers, you know, to make a profit, so they don't always build here. But we do have some subdivision developments ready to go, so we're hoping we'll start to fill that gap. And then on the rental side, we'll fill that. And then Axe Housing, which is located on Pleasant, is actively working to try to prepare people to be home buyers. So I think we just have a shortage of everything, but I think the affordable housing is what concerns us the most, because because it's what community development does, but also because those are the people that are in most need. A person just waiting for a new house doesn't have as much of a need as somebody who is living beyond their means and are struggling to pay rent.
But like you say, any new houses
Yeah.
into the market liberates other houses. So
Right.
there's advantages to whatever it is that
whatever
developers might
that's
want to
built.
build. So it seems like a interesting problem you're thinking about, of how do we get the funds to get stuff building, make the right environment for developers and builders to come in, and also get people ready to buy in. You want to add something here, Teri?
Yeah, I was just going to say, and also our existing housing stock, because we have an older housing stock, especially in our Hackett and Merrill neighborhoods. And so we have the housing rehab loan program, and we've injected some TIF housing money to offer grants for people. So we've had a roof grant program, so people can just replace their roof. They can come into us, and it's actually a forgivable loan over 5 years. And that's been wildly successful. We replaced 35 roofs last year.
Wow.
And we're on target to replace about 30 more this year. And then our housing rehab loan program is funded through other grant funds that we have, community development block grant and home funding. And people can get a combination of either a loan or and a forgivable loan to do exterior work, interior work. We do handicap accessibility and things like that. So I think another piece to this for our housing stock is maintaining the housing stock that we have, because if it deteriorates, then we lose those units too. So trying to keep people in their homes and maintaining those affordable units and maintaining our older housing stock is a really important piece as well.
So can you talk a bit about that? If there's a homeowner watching and thinking, wait, I need assistance, do they go to the city website? Do they go through a nonprofit partner? How would someone find out about these possibilities?
That's a great question. So if they're looking for a rehab loan or something, they could go to the city's website under the Community Development Department, and then we have the housing rehab loan program listed there. Same with the roof program, you know, things. For if they want to purchase a house, Axe Housing would be one of the, it's a nonprofit, and they have, I think their website is, you know, if you Google it, they can find it.
Yep.
And they offer a different kind of program where they match people with houses that are vacant right now, and then they work with the homeowner to rehab it and buy the property and then rehab it. And then NeighborWorks America, they have homebuyer education, and then when they have down payment assistance. And same with, NeighborWorks Blackhawk Region. And same thing, NeighborWorks Blackhawk Region has their own website. You can go in there. And so I think with the combination of the city and those two nonprofits, those are the main sources. And then we're all good about kind of cross-referencing or cross-referring to other organizations.
So if someone ends up at one, but really they should be there, the person who's there probably knows and can
we're
sort of send you.
knowledgeable, and we know the people, so we,
Yeah.
we'll point them in the right direction.
Very good. So let's talk about zoning. I know one of
Okay.
our favorite topics. Could you maybe just talk a bit about, for viewers, what is zoning? Why do cities have zoning rules? And then what's changed in Beloit zoning in the last few years to help with this housing situation?
Well, the entire city, is zoned something, and it's really based on how the land can be used. And so kind of what you do with the zoning is there'll be several types of residential zoning, several types of commercial, and several types of industrial, with the goal to kind of minimize any negative impacts by locating near each other. And so every property has a zoning designation, and based on that there will be different land uses allowed. There'll be different setbacks, like how far a building can be set back from the property line, the front, the rear, the side, where you can put an accessory structure like a garage, a shed, a carport, something like that. The zoning can be changed. There's a process for that if somebody is interested in changing their zoning. Right now we're in the midst of updating our zoning ordinance along with several other to create a new type of ordinance that kind of brings them all together, the land division, the streets, a bunch of the ordinances into one. So you have a unified development ordinance. And so what we're trying to do, we had updated our comprehensive plan in 2024, and what we're trying to do is create almost more of a traditional type of development pattern. And so like you take some of the central city neighborhoods and you have where there might be a commercial space with housing above, and that commercial space is vacant because in '99 we downzoned everything to residential. So we're trying to allow opportunities for those commercial spaces to be reutilized. Also trying to allow for more density, to have, because there are a lot of areas in this country where they are well-to-do places that have more dense development. It's more efficient, having narrower streets instead of these big wide streets, and it makes it easy to speed down. And so trying to have a more walkable feel, and reuse of some of these commercial spaces are good for just walking to a small business. We have a space that recently was sold. We're waiting to see because we know a baker and a barber were interested in it. It's like a cool idea that you could walk to the baker and not, I mean, downtown is great, but the idea that, you could just walk down the street on a Saturday morning, Sunday morning, and, get
In your own neighborhood.
in your own neighborhood.
Yeah.
And so trying to have more traditional focus, and so that's underway, and we'll hopefully have that done by the end of the year. But the purpose of zoning just really relates to how the land is used, and trying to assure you don't have those negative impacts.
And it kind of sets the rules. It doesn't guarantee that anyone will move a
Yeah.
particular kind of business in, but it allows
Yeah.
it to be possible.
Yeah, and then if a zoning change occurs, it has a public hearing so that the neighbors get notified and gives people an opportunity to say how they feel about it. And so it doesn't get changed without the public's involvement. So there's a public process for any changes from that plan, and there's also a public hearing when we actually adopt any zoning changes. And some of the changes we've made more recently after the comp plan, but in advance of this ordinance, was we made some changes to make it a little more flexible for businesses. There were a lot of processes for outdoor seating areas, drive-through areas, and stuff which were not adding a lot of value, and so we're trying to not just make somebody jump through hoops, but to try to, like, if there's no value added by the process, let's just not do it. And then
Just let it be allowed by
let it-
default rather
yeah,
than let people
yeah.
have to apply for it. Yep.
Because what we were doing is basically putting somebody through a process, and everything was built into the ordinance, so there wasn't a lot gained by the process. And you don't get a lot of negative opposition to drive-throughs and outdoor seating areas and stuff like that. But that's kind of the goal, is to try to not bog down businesses by a big process unless it is necessary. We think the public input is really, instrumental in trying to helping council make those decisions.
So when you think about the changes we're doing in Beloit, are they the kinds of things that lots of cities across America are doing now? Are we sort of leading the way, behind the way, in the middle of the way, doing something totally crazy, or is this the way of cities in these days?
I think a unified development ordinance has been done in many places, so I don't think that's new. I think there is a trend towards more density, and just because of the use of the land and climate change, stuff like that, it's much better to have people walking or riding a bus or riding a bike, and rather than everybody having to commute long distances. And so I think it's a trend nationwide that we're kind of agreeing with. And I think when we did our comprehensive plan, everybody seemed real interested in it. Like when we had our visioning session and we talked about how would you like development to happen, and people are excited about business below and housing up and all those kind of options and the walkability. And you get the naysayers on social media who don't like some of this stuff, but I think overall the people who like it don't always come out saying, I love this is great. They just kind of are like, oh, good, I can walk there,
Yeah, it always strikes me as odd that people who go on vacation choose places where they have exactly this. And you think, you could have this in your own city too,
exactly.
if only it was allowed.
Yeah.
People love going to vacations in Manhattan or European cities where you have apartments and hotels above and thing below, and you walk 2 blocks and you see 40 things, not 2 things. And it's people's revealed preferences show that they actually really love them. They just don't imagine that they could live in such a place.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting. Okay, let's talk about public housing a little bit. You oversee public housing operations. What are the biggest challenges and opportunities right now in providing affordable housing to people in the city of Beloit area?
I think that, it's great to have that option for people to have an affordable housing option. I think the challenge is that there's more people needing that assistance, and also that the rules are just changing kind of dramatically at HUD, at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, who funds the Housing Authority. So the Housing Authority is 100% grant funded through federal grant dollars. There's no local tax dollars in that anywhere.
So the city administers it, but all the money is coming from the federal government.
Yeah, and so it's entirely funded that way, and it has been since the beginning. And so every budget cycle, when they talk about changing things, it always gives a little anxiety, for the staff and for people who are in housing. What would we do? And thankfully, they've not made dramatic changes, but they are changing some of the rules that you're just trying to stay on top of them to kind of follow what this current administration wants. But I think the challenge with that, with public housing in Section 8 and the Family Self-Sufficiency Program that Teri mentioned that is still there, is that every year, we have to apply for the family self-sufficiency funds. We have to, kind of hope that we'll get budgeted fully so that we can continue to provide the services we do. And one of the changes that they had proposed was, the administration had proposed was limiting Section 8 for people to only be on Section 8 2 years. And sometimes it's just not enough time for somebody to be on their own with housing. Even the Family Self-Sufficiency Program, where the goal is to get them off the program and they're actively working as a case manager, takes 5 years. And so this idea that people only need 2 years unless they're elderly and disabled, I think scares people. And so I think that's the biggest challenge, is when you see the news, the funding might not be there and people get panicked who are in affordable housing or receiving our assistance.
Yeah, I think there's a lack of understanding of poverty in general and generational poverty. And I've seen that with, some of the proposals and stuff that are coming down from, various, government agencies bigger than us. And Julie hit it right on the head. Even working with a case manager, it takes 5 years. And, so the thought that somebody can, in 2 years, get back on their feet is, I don't think that's realistic.
Which could be why it didn't survive, that it didn't move forward, because maybe people saw that. And although it was the president's idea, it didn't get support in Congress.
It seems like it's a interesting thing to have programs that are grant funded. It's wonderful to get the outside funds coming to Beloit, but also every year a little uncertainty about, will we get it again? Is it still going? It can be hard to manage that sort of thing with a project. Besides the things that we've already talked about, are there any other housing programs or incentives or opportunities that Beloit residents might not know about but should?
We do have $3.3 million in TIF housing funds that we have been tasked with giving that money out this year. That money would be available to for-profit and nonprofit entities for housing activities. We haven't narrowed down exactly what housing activities will be eligible, But I think that people who are interested in building affordable housing, it has to be for affordable housing, constructing affordable housing, that money will be available to them, and we should see some new affordable units essentially in 27. So I guess kind of keep an eye out and kind of watch the market to see what's available, because I think we're going to see, we've got the purchase rehab under construction, we've got 2 houses that Wisconsin Partnership for Housing Development is constructing this year, which would be available for home ownership. We've got the Riverside Apartments coming up, and so there's, I think for people who are looking for housing, just keep an eye out. I think more housing options are going to be available in the future.
Coming soon.
For transit, I know it's not housing, but some things that our residents might not be aware of is at the beginning of the school year last year, we did add a fixed route that operates 3 hours in the morning and 3 hours in the evening that does a figure 8 throughout the city that hits all of the schools. So that's intended for, students, but the general public can still ride it too. And we also introduced 2 new fare types, which means that they're reduced fare. So students can now ride for 50 cents. Our regular fare is $1.50, but students can ride year-round for 50 cents. That's K through 12 students. And then veterans we added as a reduced fare, so they ride for half fare at 75 cents.
Okay. So anyone who is not provided bus transportation or whatever else could take students could take the bus to get to their schools. It's a wonderful thing. Is there anything else you want folks to know about housing, transit, community development in Beloit that we haven't talked about?
Not that I can think of.
There's so many, but we need like 5 hours of a show.
A weekly session just on that. Wonderful. Well, thanks so much for joining us today. We've been speaking with Julie and Terry from the City of Beloit's Community Development Department. Coming up next, we have Ashley Oldham, the assistant women's soccer coach at Beloit College. Joining us today is Ashley Oldham. Ashley is the assistant women's soccer coach at Beloit College. She has been with the school since January of 2025. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you.
Happy to have you here.
Yeah.
Maybe we could just start a bit with your story. What drew you to soccer originally, probably as a player, and then how did that evolve into coaching at the collegiate level?
Yeah, so I just kind of started playing when I was really young, and then kind of continued into the club level. I tried playing hockey for a little while. And
ice hockey or field hockey?
Ice hockey.
Okay.
Ice
I'm from a
hockey.
place where it's field hockey, so I always have to ask.
Yeah, my brother and all of our little neighbor kids played hockey, so I was like, oh, I'll give that a go, gave it a go, but soccer's kind of what I ended up sticking with. I played at a pretty high level in club, and then I obviously wanted to go on and play in college. So I played at a smaller school, Division III school in Michigan called Alma College. And then I played for 5 years there because of my sophomore into my junior year, COVID hit. So I got that extra year of eligibility back, and so my degrees in secondary education. So when I did my student teaching, I was able to play for my 5th year. Just kind of that background in education kind of drew me a little bit into coaching. I wanted to teach high school students and then also coach. And then kind of the opportunity to kind of join the coaching staff at Alma kind of fell into my lap. The coach that I coached under my 5th year, she came in pretty late, kind of in July, and so she didn't have time to hire an assistant coach. So I kind of helped her out throughout the fall just as a 5th year, like being around the program and kind of knowing the ins and outs of the school at that time. So then when I graduated in December, she asked me to join staff, and so I joined staff there in January of 23. And then I kind of coached there for 2 years, and I felt like it was kind of time for a change. You know, they always say you grow when you're uncomfortable. So I kind of branched out and looked for other schools to kind of go coach at, and I took an interview here, and I really liked it, and so I kind of moved here, come January 25.
I imagine there's a lot of similarities between Alma and Beloit College, both small liberal arts colleges in the Midwest with Division III programs. And
yeah,
that
definitely.
Sort of thing.
Yeah.
So when you think about your coaching style and as you're working in this, what's been the biggest influence you've had on that? What's something you've taken from previous coaches or non-coaches, and how does that sort of show up in how you coach every day?
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm not a super like vocal coach. I'm kind of one that's going to sit back and allow you to kind of just play. You know, I always tell the girls, like, at the end of the day, like, I can help you in practice, I can coach you up in practice, but like at the end of the day, you're in the white lines on game day. You know, you're in between, you're in the field, not me, I'm outside the field. And so we kind of talk about, you know, at the end of the day, like, I can tell you what to do at practice and stuff, but in the game, like, you're going to be the one having to make those decisions. I can't stop the game on the fly and kind of give you a coaching point. Like, you kind of have to be able to adjust and make those decisions on your own. You know, I do, with that being said, like, I'm definitely one of the coaches that I do a lot of listening. I take a lot of, the athletes are in the office often telling me about everything, anything and everything they want to talk about.
Not just soccer.
Yeah, not just soccer. So it's kind of nice to be able to kind of be that person for them. So like that's kind of a little bit of my coaching style. I just kind of want to be there for them, be that person. I think a lot of them, especially from our program, a lot of them are far away from home. And so kind of knowing that they don't, obviously their parents are still in their life and all of the adult figures are still in their life, but they're in their life in a different way. And so I try to kind of be that adult figure in their life that they can come to talk about anything, or some of them, you know, don't have a car on campus and they need to go to a doctor's appointment. And so kind of just being available for them in a way that maybe their parents can't be. That's kind of off the field. That's a little bit more of the coaching style I have. And then on the field, definitely detail-oriented.
What does detail-oriented look like in soccer?
Kind of just like the little things of like using the proper foot, or playing your teammate to the proper foot, or you know, just kind of those little details. They seem really nuanced and stuff, but I think at the end of the day, like, being able to take the touch and not kill it under you, and be able to take a touch forward and then play and just play 1-2, and kind of like some of that stuff, detail oriented in that way. So
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So thinking about how you thought you would go into education and now you're in coaching, what similarities do you see from your student teaching days to coaching, to teachers?
Yeah.
What are they similar? Are they different? What do you think?
I kind of talked to my parents actually when I was deciding not to go into education and actually take the coaching job. I kind of talked to them a little bit about how I am teaching. I'm just teaching in a different environment. So instead of teaching in a classroom, I'm teaching on a soccer field. And so having those similarities, I do think that, you know, the background in education definitely helps me in the sense of, you know, I have an understanding of how, you know, everyone learns differently. You know, there's kinesthetic learning, there's audio learning, visual learning. And so for those athletes, like, you know, I found this fall that there was a couple of times that the head coach was, you know, only giving the audio version of the learning, and some of the girls could not pick it up. And I'm like, you need to be able to show it, and you need to be able to allow them to walk through it before just throwing them into it and expecting them to understand it right away. I'm like, because not everyone learns that way. But the education piece is definitely, I think, helps me in that, being able to understand a little bit more of like what the athletes need. But yeah, I think the biggest piece is like, I'm still teaching, I'm just teaching in a different environment.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
So when you think about coaching at the Division III level, what does it take behind the scenes to really build a successful women's soccer program? What do people not see on game day but happens all the other days or even off the field?
Yeah, I think a lot of it is just kind of like the culture building that you know we're trying to build here. Obviously we're still kind of in the rebuilding phase of our program, and so being able to really hone in and find the athletes who want to buy in and be here and, you know, want to put in the work and do the hard things. I say to the athletes all the time, like, you can do hard things, but like that's kind of a little bit like pieces of it is being able to like really find the athletes that want to be here, they want to buy in, they want to do the hard, they want to raise the standard. That's kind of a little bit from like that end is like, that's kind of what goes into building the program for sure.
What do you see for students? You know, they're not in a Division I program. They're not professional footballers or whatever. You know, there's this sort of thing you sort of see on TV sometimes. But what's it like being a student athlete at a Division III school where they're a student and an athlete? How do they find that balance? And what role do you play there?
We definitely try, and like, you know, we always say like you're never gonna miss school. You're never gonna miss class for a practice. You know, we do practice at kind of different times throughout like the week. We're not practicing at the same time every day, just because, you know, sometimes you're going to play on turf on Saturday, so Thursday and Friday you're going to practice on the turf, which in our case, like football practices on the turf because they play on the turf. So, you know, sometimes we have to go a little bit later. So depending on if somebody has a night class, you're going to go to night class over practice. So really kind of focusing on that student piece, because, you know, you are here for your education. You are here to continue on in that realm. So being able to like really hone in on the student piece is really important. But I think, you know, the Division I level, it's a little bit of, you know, they have the opportunity, they have more class times, they have more availability that way, and, you know, they may have their own field, you know, where sometimes we have to share with the men, but I think, you know, being able to make it work, I think we do a pretty good job of that. You know, our coaching staffs are kind of combined as of now, so we have about 5 coaches on each coaching staff, so we work pretty closely together, which I think really helps kind of combine the programs, but in a nice way. But keeping them separate, but combining in the sense of like, you know, like the men's program will have about 44 students on the program next fall. And so, you know, having 5 coaches available to them throughout the sessions makes, you know, you can have smaller groups, which, you know, I can hone in on the details and be able to really like focus on, you know, everyone rather than people getting lost in the big groups and stuff. So I think that's really important.
So it seems like some sports in Division III, the men's and the women's, have like different games in totally different locations on different days. Is soccer like that, or do you travel together to the same locations and men's and women's plays the other college on the same?
Yeah.
The same
So
time?
the only time that we would really play a back-to-back like doubleheader would be during our conference season. It's kind of how our conference runs it. So those games happen on Saturdays if we do play a doubleheader. So if we're playing a conference game during the week, the men would play on Wednesday or Tuesday, and then we would play on Wednesday, or we would play on Tuesday and they play on Wednesday. So it's always either Tuesday or Wednesday. They try to stagger it just because, you know, like I said, they're trying to focus on the academics, and, you know,
Then if students have to miss the end of the day classes a little bit, they're not always missing the same one.
And so like when we have our conference schedule before we make our non-conference schedule, and so when we make our non-conference schedule, we really try to focus and ensure that students are only going to be missing about 10% at the most, no more than 10% of one class. So, you know, there's a couple days that we have Monday games, and we have Thursday games and like random days, but it just really allows the students to be able to attend class and be in class and not be missing the same class over and over and over again.
Yeah, it's hard to be successful in your class if you're never there.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about recruiting. Maybe something an average viewer wouldn't know is how much of your job is out there talking to high school students and helping them find a college that's a good fit for them.
Yeah.
What works for you in that? What falls flat? What's that part of your job like?
Yeah, so, you know, we spend a good chunk of our time recruiting. You know, we're, especially right now with rebuilding the program, you know, I've attended a good chunk of showcases. You know, I'm going down to Ohio in
What's
April.
a showcase?
Just kind of like a tournament where teams play, but they normally have like rosters and kind of like lists of students that are committed, and so you can kind of watch the athletes and kind of pick and choose and kind of reach out to athletes if you think they might be a good fit for your program. Athletically, obviously, you know, my biggest thing is, you know, we want to protect the culture here. So if I have a conversation with an athlete and I don't think that they'd be a good fit culturally, like, unfortunately, that's going to trump the athletics for me. Kind of, you know, obviously we want good athletes here and we want good players, but I always say, like, you know, we want you to be a good human first. So being able to find athletes that are good humans and that will fit our culture, I think is really important. But, you know, like going to showcases, I'll go out to Ohio in April and watch one of the bigger tournaments that happens on the in the Midwest. And then, I'll start reaching out to some of those athletes. We're in conversations with a good chunk of athletes right now. We're already moving into the 2027 class. But for me, I think the biggest thing that I find success in is, I am still pretty young, and so finding connections with the students in that sense, because I am so recent out of college. I do have a better understanding of, what it takes to be a college athlete, like right now, and kind of like what goes into it, because I just did it so recently. And I also think, being a young female coach in the NCAA, there's not very many of them. And so for some of those athletes, it's really important to have a female coach, a female figure that they can like rely on and be a part of their college experience.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
When you talk to players and their families and at the high school, and they're ultimately choosing Beloit over other options, what do you find are the reasons that people do that? Is there often one? Is it just different for every family? What really is resonating about Beloit College and the city of Beloit with the recruits and their families?
Yeah, I mean, I think it, for some students, is a little bit of everything. I think some people, they like the downtown area, how it's kind of been revamped, and the education, the prestige that Beloit has, and a lot of people, when they are looking kind of at the Division III level, yes, they want to play sports, but they do have an understanding that the academics are normally pretty high. And I think with Beloit, that is the standard. Like Beloit is a tough college that's gonna kick you in the butt sometimes, but I think it's
grow you and prepare you.
Grow you and prepare you for the future. And I think like even the internships that are available and the professors being willing to meet with you all the time, I think like that's really important to a lot of students. I know it was important for me when I went to school. I was just like, I'm not going to be able to go into a classroom with 400 kids and I'm not going to find success in that realm. And I think for a lot of students, that's important. Like, I loved being able to go into my professor's office and then be like, hey, Ashley, how are you? Or how was your game on Saturday? And I think that's something that you can find here at Beloit. And for some students, that's like really important. So I think the class sizes paired with academics, paired with the downtown, paired with all the opportunities, the ability to make an individualized major, I think those are all really big selling points that athletes, student athletes really enjoy.
That's great to hear.
Yeah.
When you're meeting a potential player in the high school area, what are some of the most important attributes you're looking for on the field or off?
Yeah, so like I said, the biggest, one of the first thing for me is, be a good human first. That's really important because like I said, we want to protect the culture. So kind of off the field, that's important. Obviously, we're looking to find students that are academically sound, looking for good grades, just kind of helps with making sure that they, get good financial aid and stuff like that. That's kind of...
When it's hard to be successful at college if you're not academically prepared for college.
Yep, exactly. Yeah. And I think too, the other thing, like on the field, we want someone who's going to work hard, somebody who's going to, work for their teammates. We're not looking for somebody who's getting in arguments with other athletes. Like, we're just not looking for that. And so I think being able, obviously there's bits and pieces to each position that is important. And obviously, we're looking for those as well. But, the hardworking athlete, the good student, the good human, and you can kind of tell when you have the initial conversation with them, which I think is really helpful. And then, obviously, if we have a good initial conversation and we get them on campus and they don't, jive with the athletes, we get their opinions too, because at the end of the day, like, it's also they're a part of that program, and it's kind of their program. And so being able to allow them the opportunity to be able to protect it, I think is really important.
Build the right set of teammates.
Yep.
So how do you think when students are on campus, how do you think about building that team culture, developing players over 4 years, not just the athletes, not just as athletes, but as people? What does that look like?
Yeah, so, like I said, like we are, building them and, building that culture is really important. So at the Division III level, you're allotted 10 leadership days. You can use them throughout the year. It's kind of a time to talk about anything and everything but X's and O's. Okay. So you can't talk tactics.
So it's like not a practice where you're kicking a ball, but a practice where you're doing other things.
So it's kind of like a classroom session. So like, for example, this upcoming Sunday, we're doing one on problem solving. So, we'll talk about problem solving on the field a little bit, like obviously not X's and O's, but like how can you handle, you know, confrontation from another athlete, or kind of a little bit like that.
You think
or,
the ref is being unfair or something, right?
Yep,
Yeah.
kind of something like that. You know, we did one on, we had Pat Miller, our athletic director, come in, and he talked a little bit about like grit and kind of the process that is to kind of be successful, you know, being process driven. So that was interesting to kind of hear about that. But we use those 10 leadership days to kind of, we use them in the spring in kind of preparation for the following fall. So we go through those throughout the spring, and then they go home for summer. And they, you know, continue to do their workouts and do all that stuff. And then they come back in the fall, and we take that kind of like core group that we had in the spring, and they kind of like bleed that into the incoming freshmen.
The new students
as well.
who come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So fans see the matches. They show up on the day, or they're watching the live stream. But what's something that happens either in practice, preparation, team management, behind the scenes that you think is the real driver of success?
Yeah, I mean, I think the students are probably one of the biggest factors. I think, like I said, you know, obviously we play a part in it, but at the end of the day, they're the ones that are putting in the work, and they're the ones who are, you know, willing to do the hard things to find success. I think, you know, the little things behind the scenes of like, you know, making sure we have the right uniforms, making sure we have enough uniforms, making sure, you know, they're fed. And so some of those things, like on my end, is what I did this fall, you know, ordered all the away meals, I ordered all the meals for the buses, I got all the rosters printed, you know.
You don't think about it, so you're sitting on the bus and hungry, right?
So those are kind of little things that, you know, we do, but obviously, you know, prepping for games, watching the other team's film, kind of getting a little bit of a scout. Obviously, you know, everything can change on a dime, but like being able to kind of have a little bit of an idea, you know, we spend about probably watching a little bit of film, do a little film session with the whole team. Those are kind of the little things that are like behind the scenes that I'm not sure everyone necessarily thinks about.
Yeah, for sure. Are there any myths or misconceptions out there about Division III athletics or soccer in general that you think people should know?
I'm not too sure. I think, you know, I think sometimes maybe there's a little bit of a misconception that Division III athletics isn't necessarily like a super high level. I think that, you know, anybody who's playing college athletics, you know, that's like huge. Like I think the number is about 7% of all high school students play at some sort of level in college. And so, I mean, they're kind of the minority, any athlete that's playing at a higher level. And so I think, you know, being able to celebrate that, even if, you know, it is Division III, it's not Division I, you know, like, but I think, you know, sometimes they think that, you know, Division III programs can't be as successful or can't hang with other divisions. Like, yeah, I don't think, you know, every Division III team can hang with every Division I team, but I think there are, you know, teams that can, and I think, you know, we're striving to, you know, grow the program and continue to build on the recent success of the program. So, you know, they think maybe that's a little bit of a misconception, is that, you know, Division III athletics isn't as hard, or it's not as an exciting thing, but I think it's very exciting.
Well, in Division III versus Division I rules, Division III preserves more, it sort of allows less practice time and less game time, but that means it preserves more time for the student athletes to do the student side of being an athlete.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
For someone who's not planning to be a professional athlete one day, it probably makes a lot of sense, right?
Yep, definitely. Yeah. We definitely preserve, you know, the student side of things, being able, you know, like in the spring we're only allotted 24 days of contact, so about 24 sessions.
And 10 of them are leadership days. Yeah.
The leadership days are separate.
Separate, okay.
Yep, so the leadership days are separate, but then you're allotted like one play date. So you can play 180 minutes in that day, but you only get one day to play those minutes. So
one fun game in the spring.
Yeah. So like whereas like at the Division I level and the Division II level, you're allotted mini games. And so like you said, like definitely preserving the student side of things. You know, the spring, And the spring semester is definitely a time when the students really get to just like be a student, which I think is really important because I think that experience is also a part of your
And I
college
imagine
career.
at Division III schools, students could study abroad, for example, do 1 semester in another country to get a different kind of experience, where that'd be really hard to do if you were in a Division I program.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
wonderful.
Yeah.
All right, is there anything about Beloit College, the Beloit College soccer program, Division III athletics that you think we haven't talked about people should know?
Not really. I don't think so. I think we covered a lot of it.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for coming today.
Yeah,
It's been
thank
wonderful to
you.
hear about. We've been speaking with Ashley Oldham, the assistant women's soccer coach at Beloit College. Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.